In this video, we're going to take a peek at how, as a coordinator, you can adjust and control your students' access to TMC and clinical simulation exams. Now, first thing I want to do is show you from a student's perspective, and so I'm going to log in as a student here so you can kind of see what I'm referring to here. Okay, so as I get in, when a student goes into their dashboard, they have the opportunity to start a TMC exam or a clinical simulation exercise. Now, if I go in here, I want to show you what happens. So the student has the ability, we're generating a TMC exam. As you can see, they can select one of the forms. What you'll see here is that there are several forms, and what forms they can use, what testing exams they can use, has a lot to do with what you as a coordinator have made available to them. So these can be turned on and off, and you may notice that there's some numbers that are being skipped here, A, then there's a B, but C is being skipped, and you might have some that have just kind of a gray bar across them. And that would mean that you as a coordinator have turned them off. The student can see that there's an exam there, but they can't start the exam because maybe you're reserving that. Now, if I go back also to look at the clinical simulation, it's really the same thing. You can go into clinical simulations. As you can see here, this student, all the clinical simulations in this case are on, and so the student can start this clinical simulation and all of these, any one of these, in either testing mode or teaching mode. But you as a coordinator can turn these off. So you can make it to where they cannot start cardiac intensive care. You can either just turn it off altogether, or you can make it to where the teaching mode is turned off so they have to do it in testing mode. And perhaps you've done that as an assignment. And so now that you can see what it looks like from the student's point of view, let me just show you how when you log in as a coordinator, you can control your students' access to TMC exams and clinical simulations. Now that we've seen what you can do with students, let's just go into our own coordinator dashboard here, and let's have a look at our dashboard. Now, we've covered this dashboard in another video if you're not familiar with this, but what we want to do is we've just seen how a student may log in and they may or may not have access to TMC or clinical simulation exams or the teaching mode on a Clin Sim. Remember, that's in control. You can control that, and here's how you do that. So once you log in, you can go into this box called Access Control, and then you can access or control TMC exams and clinical simulations. Don't confuse that with the box right next to it. This is a way for the instructor to go in and take a TMC practice exam without it really counting in their group. It just allows them to play with it. What we're looking for is access control to the TMC exams and the clinical simulations. So all I have to do is I have to just press that, and I'll go in here. What you'll see is that the exams for Form A, B, C, D, E, and so on are turned off. And you can tell because there's a little switch here. If I want to turn on Form A for the students, all I would do is just flip that switch, and as you can see, it's now on. And I could turn on several or one at a time. What happens here is that an instructor commonly wants to have them turned off at first because they want to reserve them for a specific time period. Maybe they're going to give a midterm assignment to the student for the weekend and just say, I want you to do Form B. So they might have all of these off, but for the weekend on Friday, they might just say, I've turned on Form B. Now you can go do that one. And then you can come back after the weekend, and the coordinator can turn that right back off. And then they can't access it again. Now, when these are on, and you'll probably want all of them on if the student has graduated and you're just ready for them to practice. But when these are on, the student can take that exam. But whenever they have one off, when they log in and look at their possibilities for exams, they can see that Form B exists, but they can't start it. And so for that reason, sometimes they may come to you and say, hey, how come I can't start Form B? It's because they can see that it's on the list, but you have it turned off. And sometimes you have to explain that to them. So that's how that works here. Now I'm going to come back to this, but let me go back into clinical simulations and show you that. So if I go back to the dashboard here, I can go into clinical simulations. Clinical simulations have just a little bit more complexity in that not only can you turn on and off their availability, but you can turn on and off teaching mode. Teaching mode just means when they take the simulation and they select a response, so they select heart rate or whatever, then not only is it going to give them the result as it would in testing mode, it might tell them the heart rate, it's also going to add another little couple sentences there that say that's correct or incorrect and here's why. And so that's what teaching mode is. So another common practice is to turn on a simulation, but turn off teaching mode, like this one. So I'm going to be here. I have multiple trauma. They can go take it, but they can only take it in testing mode. And so they're not going to see the answers. Now, after they've struggled through that clinical simulation a few times, then you could come back and say, well, now I'm going to permit you to start it in teaching mode if they prefer. And then they can see the answers as they go along, and they can learn some things. Notice up here, though, that multiple trauma number 1, it's not available at all, even to start. The student can see that it exists, but there's no button to even start the thing. And so throughout all the clinical simulations, you can turn these things on. Right here, you'll see that they're all on and available, but they're all in testing mode. And if I want to change that, then I would have to just say, well, on this one, it's in teaching mode. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take it in teaching mode. It means they have the option to do it in testing or teaching. But if I turn it off, then they don't have that option. They can only do it in testing mode. And so that's how that works. I want to point out here too, and I'll show you this in another area, that I have this on all of the cohorts. I have this on all students. But if I have created cohorts, and so say if I've created some seniors, I can have a different arrangement of on and off and teaching modes than I do, for instance, my juniors group. And so you can create separate cohorts and control them as a cohort instead of just controlling your whole group. Very commonly, and I'll talk about this in cohorts later, commonly a program will create several cohorts, very often juniors and seniors, but they might have a third for graduates. If they're allowing some of the graduates to continue using the system, then the graduates might have everything on. You may not be controlling them at all, but your seniors you might be controlling, and your juniors you might be controlling separately as well. And so that's how that works. Now I'm going to go back here to the dashboard. I want to go back into TMC and show you just one other thing. If you go into the TMC exam areas, let me go back one more time here. If you go into this, not instructor access, but control, right here is where I meant to go. If you go into here, and you might have everything off because you just want them to take a certain form when you want it. Let's say it's the spring is approaching, you want them to take just Form C. Here's another important consideration. If you really, really want to reserve all of the Form C questions so that they have never, ever seen those before, there is another thing that you might need to turn off, and that is the ability to do custom exams. Custom exams really are the opportunity for the student to go in and take random generated exams, but it could pull an exam question from Form C. And so if you really want to restrict the questions, then you'll turn this off and then turn off the exams that you want to, and then they won't have access to that. So let me because this is a little confusing, let me make myself clear. If you have all of these exams off, but you have random exams on, they can generate a random exam. It's not a particular form, and it might pull questions, a few here and there, from a variety of all the forms, and even more than this, even at our database. But if you didn't want them to have any chance of seeing any of the questions on Form C, then you'd lock even the custom exams down. And now, when they see Form C, this is the first time they've ever seen those questions. And so that's an important consideration. Now, if you need more explanation, we can always walk you through that in a one-on-one tour over Zoom or however you like it. But that's how that works. So that's how you can control exam access to TMC exams and clinical simulation practice exams.